And it was
Yeah.
like by just streamlining some of the operations, by increasing the rates a little bit, like the dude added $1 million worth of equity to this business with just a small, few tweaks, because the old operators, 80 years old, like, I don't know, he didn't want to be bothered with this stuff. Like, just he wanted to get out. And, just sometimes it's these little dials that you can turn, and they have big impacts.
We had a lot of fun today recording this episode. Listen, Nick Loper from Side Hustle Nation is a genius when it comes to starting side hustles, hence his book, $1,000 100 Ways How Real People Make Real Money on the Side, and how you can too. You can find it on Amazon. There will be a link in the show notes. You're really going to love this. If you have something going already and you want to do something on the side, if you have a job already and you just want to test the waters of your entrepreneurship, your entrepreneur skills, listen, this is the episode for you. I really hope you enjoy this one. Nick's an incredible guy, and you can just tell his vast knowledge throughout the conversation. Please, as always, give this a like, a subscribe, and I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think of the episode. Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Hierarchy of Needs podcast. My name is Tim Palladino, and this is the show for entrepreneurs who want a higher value life and business. What is up, brother Nick? So happy to have you here. We got a lot to talk about today.
What's going on, man? Thanks for the invite.
I'm pretty excited to talk about a whole bunch of things. What do we got on the menu? We got your new book that I'm super excited to chat about, 1K 100 Ways. We got we're gonna be talking about podcasting and marketing and everything that's kind of wrapped around it. For some of our listeners, I know this is going to perk their ears up. We're going to be talking about how to kind of come up with a side hustle idea. So we're going to hit the whole spectrum. We're going to hit the whole spectrum of why you're excellent. So let's land on the book a little bit later. Let's start with the side hustles. How do you find is best to generate the idea of a side hustle?
So what's kind of funny, and you've probably seen this diagram where it's like, your skills over here, your, what you like to do over here, and then like what you can get paid for down here. And like, oh, the magic happens at the, intersection of those three circles. Mm-hmm. And I saw a funny meme in the Side Hustle Nation Facebook group recently. And it was like the three circles were like a completely different corners of the page, and there was no overlap at all. It's like, well, what if your chart looks like this? And I think that's kind of the case for a lot of people. So you have to work to really find where there may be some overlap that you didn't know that there was, or find something that's just, completely off the shelf. So there's plenty for the sake of disclosure, there's plenty of like, call them off the shelf, plug and play side hustles. These would be, the Instacart delivery drivers, the Airbnb hosts, the rovers of .coms of the world. Totally fine, totally viable, very easy to get started with, but there's a natural ceiling to your earning power there, because it's like, well, if you're driving people around for Lyft, like, okay, there's a natural limit, because there's everybody else has the same skill, or most people have the same skill, so there's a natural downward pressure on price there. Where we find more people have kind of this entrepreneurial upside to their side hustles is like where they can kind of start something on their own that has some room to potentially scale and level up down the road. And where I think a lot of people overlook, and myself, I'm guilty of this too, is like, well, take an inventory of your skills. Like, what could you go out and offer? But it's like, more often I find that business ideas come from pains, right? We talked about selling pain pills versus selling vitamins. It's so much easier to sell this pain pill, like make this problem go away. And so I have an exercise, I'll call it the what sucks exercise, and normally like to be a little more optimistic than this, but for this exercise, you got to put on your pessimist hat for, a day or a week, and just have a notes app on your phone, and you're writing down everything that sucks. And so right now we're in the process of moving, and there's a lot of things that suck about moving. It's like, well, how do I get rid of all this crap that I don't want? How do I find a reliable, reputable moving service? How do I find people to come and do this stuff? Where do I find boxes? Like, there's a ton of different pain points. Like, and because apparently a lot of people are leaving California. You can't get a one-way U-Haul. Like it's like we don't have any trucks. Like, so, okay, lots of different problems to solve around that. But you have this notes app, and it's like, okay, here's everything that sucks. Maybe it's ironing your clothes. Maybe it's picking up dog poop from the backyard, which actually was a side hustle show guest, who's like, the light bulb goes off. She's picking up this dog crap in the backyard. I don't really love doing this, but if it's a pain point for me, maybe it's a pain point for others. And sure enough, she looked it up. There was already, a company or two in her area that offered, pet waste removal as a service. So she's like, maybe there's something to this. And when we spoke, she had like 80 something recurring weekly customers for this. And she,
that's amazing.
Had graduated herself, above the, maybe not above, but she'd graduated herself out of doing the manual labor. She had other people on her team, and she was kind of playing operator and, optimizing routes and, doing client onboarding and stuff. I was like, not the world's most glamorous business for sure, but, solved a real problem. And I like the recurring revenue element of it too. So if you're thinking about business ideas, I would encourage you to think of pains or problems that you've overcome in your own life, or that are still bothering you, and then go out and try and find the solution for those. Because oftentimes on the other end of those problems, there is a business idea that somebody somewhere would be worth paying for.
Yeah, quick anecdotal story about I want to say about 6 years ago now, my grandfather passed away, and he was from the early 20s generation, and accrued lots of gold coins. He had silver and gold, you name it. And when he passed, my brother took him to my grandmother to a local gold and silver buying company. So he went to the one that was like in the strip mall, and he's like, I don't know, something's not right. And then he saw an ad and brought her to one that was in a hotel, and like in a hotel room, and the guy's like just throwing the stuff around, like completely disrespectful. My brother was like, absolutely not, grandma, don't sell him anything. So he came home, we kind of chatted about it, and the next thing you know, we have a gold and silver buying business because they were trying to rip my grandma off, and that sucked. So and it turned into something quite big, to where we actually even we had a standing spot in an area called Kingston, where I'm from. And then we were like, we need to also get this online. And I remember our first order was over $3,000. Someone sent $3,000 worth of dimes. And I was like, it was like our first week that we were open. And I was like terrified. I'm like, this thing's gonna get lost in the mail. But the point is, like, it really bugged us the way grandma was treated. And we could either do something about it or, take less. And it turned into something so awesome, because when people were coming in, we knew the pain that we felt. So we were able to kind of serve them. Yeah. So inspiration really can come in from the oddest and most inconvenient places.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like, no, but why does this industry have to be so shady? Like, let's find a different way.
Yeah, all I am is just like the mailman. Like I'm just the middleman. So like, why am I getting the lion's share? I don't know. It was a really, really cool experience in realizing that old industries can change, and that I think in a way is an invitation to a lot of side hustlers. Like, just because something is doesn't mean it always has to be. So you can innovate. You don't necessarily have to fill in a gap somewhere else, but you can also innovate on something that maybe logistically doesn't work or whatever. But there's always so much opportunity.
I think that's a really good point, and that's one of the, I guess, business models that I'm kind of excited about these days, is kind of taking adding a sprinkle of digital marketing savvy to some of these older style businesses. Like maybe it's the landscaping service or the home cleaning service. Especially in the home services, you see a lot of, like, if they have a website at all, it looks like it's 20 years old, and you see like fax us for a quote
or GeoCities,
type of stuff. And it's like, no, just make it easy for me. And it's like, this was like a Twitter thread on this guy who acquired like a storage facility, like storage unit facility, which, like, I guess is like a trendy thing in the entrepreneurial space. I'm going to buy a storage unit or a storage, storage facility. And it was like, by just streamlining some of the operations, by increasing the rates a little bit, like the dude added $1 million worth of equity to this business with just a small, a few tweaks, because the old operators, 80 years old, like, I don't know, I didn't want to be bothered with this stuff. Like, just wanted to get out. And, just sometimes it's these little dials that you can turn, and they have big impacts, not just to the monthly cash flow, but like to what this business might be worth down the road. So yeah, that's one of the models that I'm excited about, kind of these like local blue collar type of service operations, and adding, being a better, you may not even need to know how to do the thing. Like, go find qualified people to go do the actual service. But if you can be a better marketer, I think there's huge opportunity, because a lot of these industries are so fragmented, right? We talked to on the Side Hustle show a few years ago, Brian Scudamore. He's the CEO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And it's like, here before he came in, a very fragmented industry with like no dominant regional or national players. And then he came through with the franchise model in his case, and became that guy. But you could look at that for house painting, for pressure washing, for mobile car detailing, right? Like, if you're looking at a national level, like there's nobody necessarily that comes to mind. Maybe there's certain players locally or regionally, but like, there's an opportunity to build a brand in that space. And you don't have to. When we spoke, he was doing like $1 million a day in revenue. It's like, man, that's wild. Wow. But you don't have to go that big. Like, if you just want a little side project, little lifestyle business, like, you can do it locally and be just fine.
Yeah, I think it's intimidating to get into for a lot of people. And I know it was to a certain degree for myself, to get into an industry that seems so set on a foundation. And something that I'd kind of like to point out is when someone does something, and you'll recognize this if you're a business owner listening, that when you do something, when you have a system or procedure, you kind of stick with it. No one really innovates in their own business. They just go with it. And if something's an old enough industry, when I say old enough, I mean like up to 5 years, as little as 5 years old, they have systems and they're not thinking about innovations. So you can see and level up what they're doing. It's so easy. We did that with, I had a company called Vine Van Gogh. It was a sip and paint company. And we would take people step by step how to recreate a painting at their favorite bar or restaurant in the area. Nice. We were in 4 different states. And the reason that we grew so fast, so fast, was because we just wanted to make it a little bit more white glove. We wanted to give them just a little bit more attention, not like rush and party. It was, as I said, white glove and more relaxed atmosphere, but still fun. And we charged a little bit more, and people recognize it. So they had something to contrast to. So us setting apart made people really think and then make a decision between the two. And, we were fortunate enough where they started choosing us. So it's create a contrast in a lot of situations. And that's where the money will flow.
Yeah, I like that. If you can't be first, be different. Was one line that I think Jonathan Mendonza
I like that one.
Laid on me. He's co-host of the Choose FI podcast, Financial Independence podcast.
Nice. So people getting into side hustles or considering potentially getting into side hustles, what are some baseline skills that you think are super, super necessary before even picking a business?
Or an avenue? It's a good question. Like, most important skills. I mean, the most important skill, and I've said this on air, is kind of the meta skill of learning new skills, because this is something that I really took for granted. I was like very, of course, in hindsight, like very grateful to have an awesome public school education and just have this, this ability to learn and study and like figure stuff out. That was just what you did. And I kind of been realizing, okay, not everybody else had that experience. So that was, that's kind of a very good baseline, but I think you still have the ability to learn whatever you need to learn. And, there's YouTube and there's Skillshare and there's Udemy and there's, the entire library is out there. Like, you can learn just about anything you need to do pretty affordably. And one of the guests on the show had like a little knife sharpening business. I was like, well, how'd you get started? And we're like, I kind of wanted like a more hands-on hobby type of thing. And so I, taught myself how to do this on YouTube, practiced with some friends and family's knives. And I think when we last spoke, he was doing like $1,500 a month. So not, wasn't blowing this up, but it was like a nice little supplemental income stream. And it was something that he enjoyed doing. And similar, like, I don't I don't have any desire to bring this nationally or something. So he's helping other people start their, little local knife sharpening operations too. I think it's kind of cool stuff, but I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would say I would even quantify it down or reduce it down to being resourceful. Just be knowing where to look, or at least having a list of places to look for answers or even questions.
Yeah, this ability to figure it out. I know Marie Forleo says everything is figure outable. I think in other skills that come to mind, like I used to be, if you asked me this 10 years ago, it would have been sales. Sales is your most important skill. Like nothing happens until somebody sells something. And I had a little bit of a sales background. Like that was kind of my role in corporate, kind of quasi sales role. That was my experience in college, like selling house painting jobs door to door, and then going out and figuring out how to actually deliver the house painting that I promised these people. But I would have told you sales. Maybe 5 years ago, I would have told you creativity. As like, well, before you even have something to sell, you got to create the thing. You got to come up with the idea. So my stance on this has definitely evolved. But one of the skills or one of the traits that I see from many Side Hustle Show guests is this willingness to experiment. And I don't know if you can qualify that as a skill, but like this, not necessarily embracing failure, because failure still sucks, but the that ability to take that first step, maybe not knowing what step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is. Like just I'm gonna try this out. If it, I'm gonna see what kind of reaction it gets. Kind of like first move in a game of chess. I'm gonna move my little pawn out into the world and genuinely, maybe, I don't know,
see what the effect is.
See what effect it has. See what kind of reaction I get.
So one of the things that I actually teach in with the clients that I coach is when you get to a point where you don't know what's next, it's time to turn on a childlike sense of curiosity. It's time to start going around and poking and asking questions and experimenting and stuff like that, because that's the only way. Because our adult logical brain is like, oh, danger, wrong way, dead end. Instead of like, let's have fun with this and like do something that we know there's going to be a dead end, but allow it to teach us once we finish. Be able to extract from the experience. So yeah, I always tell people to have a childlike sense of curiosity.
I like that. And well, you said you don't have any kids, but I get a daily dose of this with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And they're like, why is that? How does that work? I'm like, I don't know. And so we say, well, that's a good science word. It's like what they say, like when they have like a science question or something I don't know. You've reached the end of mom and dad's knowledge of the universe. So it's like, well, let's go YouTube that. Let's go look that up. And it's like, oh, cool. You learned something too.
Yeah. My niece is like that. She's just nonstop, just curious. And it's always it's so cool to see how fast it escalates into a knowledge and then into an understanding.
Yeah.
Which is, So kids got to figure it out. we need to learn from them. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the podcast and podcast marketing and how you think that's the state of the union with podcasting is.
Oh, state of the union on podcasting. So I am still bullish on podcasting, even though it is certainly more crowded in 2021 than it was in 2020, than it was in 2019, right? So the reason for that is there's still like half the population or something, I don't know the latest statistic, who have never listened to podcasts. I don't know what podcasting is. Like there's a big existing audience for podcasts, but there's still a big segment of the population left to conquest, so to speak, left to have this epiphany moment of discovering on-demand audio on whatever topic you want to learn about. Like, because that's what it was for me. It's like, oh, where has this been all my life? Like I used to drive 500, 600, 700 miles a week for work, just listening to country radio, listening to stand-up comedy, and just like, I should have been, I could have been a lot farther ahead on my journey. So I like podcasting for that reason. The biggest shifts that we've seen over the last 8 years of me having done the Side Hustle Show was, the entrance of big media and big money. So now you see ESPN and the New York Times and NPR, all of these, really well-established media brands. And you also see celebrities, bringing in their own existing audience, which I think is cool. because, they're oftentimes bringing new listeners into the fold. Like I never saw a bigger spike in listenership than when Chris Guillebeau launched Side Hustle School, like in early 2016, early 2017. I forget when he did that. But it was like, my first reaction was like, crap. Here comes a multi-time New York Times bestselling author. He's coming into my territory. Like, dude, what are you doing? But the opposite thing happened. Because he had this huge audience, this huge email list, and people were like, people were looking because he was talking about all these different side hustles. People were like, well, this is cool. What else is out there? What else have you got? So I saw a big increase in interest there. So big money, big media, celebrity podcasts, and in highly produced podcasts. So it's like, if you are starting today, you're gonna have to bring a little bit of a baseline of audio quality, like, and for me, that was like $50 mic in the living room kind of thing. Like you can get started very affordably, but it means you really got to bring it in terms of your content. Like you just study what you like and what you don't like from other shows, and be better. Like do the show that you want to listen to. Be respectful of listeners' time. Because I have what I call like the listener pyramid. If you can imagine, like the base of the pyramid is strangers, people who don't know you exist. And your goal as a podcaster is to ascend people up on this pyramid. Mm-hmm. Level 2 is listeners. Level 3 is subscribers. And the top level, like the peak of the pyramid, is fans. Like these are the evangelists. These are the people who spread the word. These are the people who, buy your products and services. Like that's kind of like what you want to do. And everything related to your show is designed to get people, climbing that pyramid. In the first stage, I don't know how granular you want to go, but like the first stage is this discovery phase, which, a lot of people will, well, I'm just going to rely on iTunes or Apple Podcasts for people to find my thing. And it's like, well, there's, 500,000, a million podcasts out there. Like, it's a simpler form of SEO than Google for sure, but it's still it can be difficult to be discovered there. And I am not entirely confident that that's how the majority of people discover new shows, right? Like if I ask you, like, well, how do you find new podcasts? Like most people will say, oh, a friend told me about it, or word of mouth or some way.
Right.
It's like, oh, you got to go check this out, versus like, well, I was searching for something and the show popped up. Like less likely to happen. Not that you should neglect, having the title of your show being reflective of what the show is about. Not that you should neglect having, compelling sounding episode titles. I was on a show, this was years ago, and they did what they were supposed to do. They're like, Nick, thanks so much for joining me. Your episode is out today. Here's the link that you can share with your people. And I click on it and it says like 33 : Nick Loper. It was like, that was the episode title. I was like, what's in it for
who's going to
like,
search for that?
Like who's like, I mean, maybe if you're, I don't know, it's some crazy celebrity and you can get away with that, but like nobody knows who what did we talk about? What are people going to get in exchange for their half an hour of listening to this? So there's lots of games to play on the just like the general marketing side. And I was kind of grateful to kind of stumble into this. I think on episode 5 was like how this one guy earned enough money on Fiverr in his first year to buy a house. And that was like the title of the episode, because that was his hook. That was his kind of like story pitch. And it was like, how did that happen? Like, I'm curious as a host how that happened. So let's dive into that. Because there's a barrier to like, well, I got to find, my podcast app, and then I got to find your show, and then I got to find the specific episode. Like there's a barrier to that. So you got to make it compelling enough for people to be willing to jump through those hoops. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally does. Totally does. And podcasting right now can be so intimidating because we're hitting this threshold where it's being made so easy by these third-party companies, and full disclosure, we're about to become one of the third-party companies. We're about to start a podcasting studio. But it becomes so noisy. It's so easy, but the noise makes it a little bit intimidating for people to get started rather. And it can get scary. it can get scary, but I think it's, if you have something relatively unique and you enjoy doing it, like for me, this podcast is selfishly to meet awesome people and learn from them and compound my understandings of certain topics. So this is a very selfish podcast in the sense where I get the most out of it. And I think people being privy to it or being part of it, they get awesome benefit from it too. And that's what we're noticing. So I don't know if that's like an angle or what you would call it, but because of my genuine interest in the people that I talk to, I think it changes how it's expressed versus just like let's talk about, let's see, social media strategy. And I just don't care, just because I'm trying to serve the audience. But yeah, that's kind of my angle. But I saw one, mind your business in dog washing. It was mind your business dog washing. That was the podcast the other day. And it was like, it's how to start a dog washing business.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. That's weird, but that's awesome. That someone cares so much about that.
But there's a niche, right? We had a guy,
and they had reviews. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a guy, Jordan Berry, on the show. He's like the laundromat podcast. It might be called the Laundromat Podcast. But he's like a laundromat investor. Like that was one of his side hustles. And he's just like so excited about that, and he's like got a dozen different reasons, like, it's, it's a cash business. It's, get depreciating asset. Like it's a great tax advantages. Like, you can buy these things at, a 2 or 3x multiple. And he's like super pumped about it. And he's got the Laundromat Podcast. He's like, it's doing surprisingly well. I was like, Jordan, pause right there. Why do you say surprising? He's like, Nick, it's a laundromat podcast. Like who is tuning into this stuff? But there's enough people out there in these kind of little micro niches that are interested in this stuff. So if you, I guess, different podcast strategy, right? Like if you want to go broad, you're gonna have to have a broader appeal. And if you want to go, go super niche, then you almost need to have your own kind of like consulting practice, your own digital product, like something, that there's, something, a back-end offer, right? Like the podcast is content marketing for the business rather than the podcast being the business itself. And it took me an embarrassing amount of time to kind of figure that out for myself. It's like, I'm going to start this podcast, like no business plan in mind. And it, probably took 60-ish episodes before I realized like, this thing, at least at that point, was never going to be a business in terms of just like pure sponsorship revenue, at least an interesting business, because it would be, podcast advertising is like amplitude and frequency. How many people can you reach? How big is your audience? And how often are you publishing? And that's why like a daily show or even a Tim Ferriss show where it's like, 2-3 times a week, like that can do really well. Big audience, multiple, lots of frequency. All of a sudden advertising becomes really, really strong option. For a smaller show, doing it once a week, it's like, this hardly pencils out. Grateful that, probably about 3 years in, like started to get sponsorship inquiries, and has become, the equivalent of a full-time income source for me the last few years. But early on, it was like, I gotta figure something else out to make this work. And for me, that was capturing emails. So it was like, okay, how can I?
Oh, nice.
How can I turn listeners into subscribers? It was kind of like the next step up the pyramid, to say, and we're joking about the awfulness that is podcast analytics. It's like, how do you turn this anonymous stranger into an actual contact, like somebody you can reach out with through email, and then tell them about your latest episode and tell them about other products and services that you have, or point them to other helpful content. Like that was such a big turning point for me in the business. And this was like 2014. Like I figured out and just, I've kind of seen diminishing returns on this, but like early on, this worked really well, was like creating an episode specific lead magnet that was just like a text summary of the episode. Like, hey, look, you're out walking the dog, you're at the gym, you're driving in your car, you're not in a great place to take notes. I get it. Don't worry, we did it for you. If you head over to sidehustlenation.com/whatever, you can download that for free. And, I had maybe 1,000 email subscribers at the time I started that. That jumped to 3,000 within 3 months, 6,000 within 6 months, 12,000 within 12 months. It was just like this really big turning point for the business. And then that, the the email is kind of a leading indicator to revenue down the road. It's like maybe like I still don't have like a very aggressive like marketing funnel where I could tell you, well, every subscriber I get is worth, a buck 37. Like it's still not like that, but it was definitely, the business side, the revenue side started to accelerate as well at that point.
Yeah, that's something that actually I'm leaning into right now too, is developing more of like a blog page, because this gets put on YouTube as well as not just the podcasting channels, but I want somewhere for someone to be able to read it. Some people just prefer reading. I prefer videos, so why not serve them? Plus it's SEO. So, you spend a couple bucks on Rev, turn it into a written conversation, and there you have. And then you can, I actually heard, what was the guy's name? Oh, I wish I could remember his name. Anyway, he turned his first 100 episodes into a coffee table book with illustrations.
Oh, okay.
And it was just it just blew my mind. I'm like, of course. So yeah.
Was it Chris Gilbo? Because he had his book, 100 Side Hustles. That's kind of a coffee table style book.
No, this guy's a history guy. He has an incredible podcast, and I can't remember what it is right now. It's like something history.
Okay.
Like Untamed History.
Hardcore History?
Hardcore History. That's what it was. That's exactly what it was.
I love this show.
So he's got a book.
Which is near death experience. It's it's some crazy episode, crazy stories just about, pandemics and other disasters.
Yeah. Yeah. He's really fascinating to listen to.
He's such a good storyteller. And that's what you want to hear. Right. So he has ascended me to the fan element of the pyramid by being, excellent at his craft, right? Like anybody who will listen, I will be like, you gotta go check this out. And my wife could not care less about history and stuff. And I'm just telling her, I have to start every story with, I know you don't care, but did you know that blah, blah, blah. And
it's got to get it out.
It's just oh my gosh, it's awesome. I just finished the 6-part saga of World War II in the Pacific. And I know my grandfather served he was stationed in Northern Australia in the Navy and stuff. So I was trying to dig into some of his did he see combat? What was he doing over there? What was that like? I don't know, total side note, but excellent example of somebody who has done very well with podcasting, by creating something that is just super compelling to listen to, even though, you stare at this and you're like, well, a 3-hour episode, who has that kind of time? But it's you chip away at it, and enough people tell you about it that eventually you're saying, okay, I can dedicate my week of commuting to learn this thing.
Yeah. And it's, this is another note that I just want to make real quick before we hop on to the next topic. I would suggest, and I'd like actually your feedback on this, if you're going to do a podcast, make it for yourself. And don't hesitate, because I hesitated for a long time. There's a lot of information out there that can get you started properly. And your first couple episodes, your first couple seasons, whatever, aren't going to be like your latter episodes and latter seasons. It's going to be so much better as you grow. So allow yourself to evolve, take the risk, bet on yourself.
Yes, you need to probably get 30, 40, 50 episodes. You got to get those reps in. I don't know if there's any way around it.
I still don't know what I'm doing.
The first ones, they're going to be awkward. They're probably going to suck. You're going to cringe when you listen to them a year later. Yeah. But I remember Joe Saul-Sehy, he's the host of Stacking Benjamins, really popular personal finance show. Mm-hmm. And
that's
he's
a good name.
I am, I'm embarrassed by the work that I did a year ago. And a year from now, I hope to be embarrassed by the work I'm doing today. It's this drive for constant improvement. And
I'm with it.
He's done really well with that. I kind of want to counter your call to do it for yourself, because I think in podcasting and content marketing, you really have to kind of think of the audience or avatar that you want to serve and do it for them. Build the show for them with your inherent curiosity and your unique angles, kind of playing into that. And I think that was kind of, again, podcast analytics, who knows, like what was driving the side hustle show in the early days was like, okay, I wanted to build the show for me, 12, 24, 36 months ago, deconstructing these business ideas, where does the revenue actually come from? Like trying to create the show that I wanted to listen to. And then, just it worked. It worked in my favor because I was like naturally curious about the stuff anyways. And to your point about like, oh, all of a sudden people who maybe charge $1,000 an hour for their consulting time are totally willing to get on a call with you because, well, you have a podcast now. And it's like, it was such a weird dynamic and such a interesting kind of networking effect that I had no real idea of getting into it. But that's been probably one of the biggest intangible benefits, is being able to now go into a conference and have people know who you are and have already met virtually, a good chunk of the attendees there by virtue of having the show.
Yeah, I was actually super surprised. This just happened yesterday. Someone reached out to us and asked, I've never even heard of this person. I don't even know how they found the podcast. I asked, it was actually their assistant that reached out to us. I was so flattered that they messaged me on Facebook and was like, hey, I love your show. Can we be on the show? And I'm like, yep, absolutely. It was a cool thing that they're offering. Yeah. And it's a really cool.
The time will come where you get inundated with those pitches.
Too many.
You don't look forward to them anymore.
Well, I hope I can serve them as best as possible until that time comes.
Yes.
Let's move over to the book. This is the big one. This is super exciting. This just came out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, this is my latest project. This is my new baby.
So it's called 1K 100 Ways. First off, I love the alliteration, and I also love that
super awkward title. But yeah,
I think I love awkward titles. I mean, the name of my podcast is Entrepreneur's Hierarchy of Needs. It couldn't be any harder to say. So I'm a fan of awkward titles. Makes you say it 10 times and memorize it.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us all about the book.
Yeah. So this is a collection of stories from the Side Hustle Nation community on how audience members, in a lot of cases, and some Side Hustle Show guests are making extra money. It goes through the same set of questions for every story, for every profile. So you can kind of compare across pages, compare apples to apples. And it's like, how did you come up with that idea? How much did it cost to get started? What did you spend that startup money on? It's always kind of curious to me.
Yeah.
How'd you get your first traction or your initial sales, your initial customers? I love reading those types of responses. Like, what else has worked to market your business? What mistakes did you make? What would you do differently if you had to start over? And it was kind of surprising because one of the most common responses to that question was like, I wish I'd started earlier. I was like, because everybody says, and everybody says this on the show too, like, what's your number one tip for Side Hustle Nation? Just get started, which is like, it's kind of like frustrating advice if you don't have the idea, you don't know what to start. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. Like, the opportunities become visible once you're in motion. And so many people, if so many people give that as like their advice or their mistake that they made, I waited too long. Like, there's got to be some merit to that. But this book was a ton of fun to put together. It took way longer than I ever expected. I thought this was going to be the easiest book in the world. It's like, I'm going to crowdsource this book. Like, I'll just put out this little survey form. People could fill in the answers and bing, bang, boom, I'll have it out in a month. And it was like anything but the case, because I, promised.
Oh, that's funny.
Promised 100 ways. And I, finally went through all of the responses and had 150, 200 responses. But some people gave you like 150 words, like, I could use a little more detail here. And some people gave you 1,500 words. And it was just a little bit of a process to kind of go through and be like, well, that is interesting. So I kind of had like a traffic light system of, green, yellow, red, and so I was going back through the yellows and being like, can you expand on this a little bit? So there was a lot of that, and then a lot of kind of formatting, normalization stuff to try and like make it all kind of consistent.
So if you were to go back and do that process again, maybe there's We're gonna do 2K 100 ways. And that's
Yeah,
gonna be the
well,
sequel. And
100K
what would you do?
part
What
two.
would you do different in that sense?
I think I could be more upfront about providing the guidance of like what a a quote good answer looks like the level of
Yeah.
detail that would be compelling. Um, that would probably be the biggest thing. Like because even I put at the top like after the first round of responses, I made a slight change to the form, like be detailed. We we can always edit stuff out, but we can't really put words in your mouth. It was kind of like the way that we phrased it. But I think with a bunch of examples, that would be a good idea for part two. The requested sequel was actually 1K 100 ways, like business ideas for kids, which I think might be a really compelling project to tackle, even if it's not $1,000, but just like business ideas for kids, as our little ones are getting, or at least our oldest is getting a little more interested in having some spending money. So we'll see if we can get down that road.
I think that's going to be, I mean, you kind of know my background with side hustle and stuff like that. And a big part of side hustle, the party game for entrepreneurs, just in case you guys don't know, is
playsidehustle.com.
Playsidehustle.com at playsidehustle.com. So yeah, one of the big things is bringing people together. And as an entrepreneur, my brother's an entrepreneur, it's something that we can bond with my niece. She's really interested in just how the world works, and business and commerce is a giant part of it. And it's something that we're into. And it's also, the more and more I think about business, the more it's actually just a game. It's just a game. There's score system, there's a point, that point system of like, hey, are you making your customers happy? Are you serving them? There's rules. And it's like, we can change this. So I think a big part of what we were doing was to influence children into being, to become brave and capable in expressing a creative idea.
Yeah.
That was a big chunk of why we created Side Hustle. It's so you can get practice, practice where it's safe.
Yes.
So you can be good at it when it's time to fill your safe. So I totally want you have my vote for that book. I definitely think it's a great idea because, when I was a kid, like we didn't, I don't know about you growing up, but like you weren't really allowed to talk about money. It was kind of like a taboo.
It kind of was. And it's kind of, probably doesn't need to be that way, but like in our house, it was, a frugal household. We were never, we're never going hungry, but it was, spending with intention was always the kind of the mantra. But I was, really grateful. Like mom and dad encouraged me to get a credit card when I was 18. Oh, you're going to want to start building credit. Like just treat it like a debit card. Like, pay it off every month. Like don't be dumb. Like don't pay 30% interest, but like, start building up your credit, which helps getting loans and other stuff down the road. I was also really grateful to have this teacher in high school, Mr. Torgett, who, was big on like the dollar cost averaging and like compound interest. Like, cause we had to learn about exponents and power laws anyways. So he's like, well, here's a real life example. Like, by the time you're retired age, you'll all be millionaires if you just follow this simple plan. And where he kind of stopped short was like, okay, that's great. You have $7 million by the time you retire if you follow this monthly investing plan. But do you need $7 million? Like where he kind of stopped short was like, okay, what's the financial end game? Or like the FIRE movement would call it, like the rule of 25 or the 4%, withdrawal rule and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like that, I don't know if that would have been motivating or terrifying to like 18-year-olds. But, when I first came across it as a late 20-something-year-old, it was actually kind of encouraging. Like, oh, like there's a milestone or there's a goalpost here. And the goalpost keeps shifting a little bit as lifestyle expenses creep up. But rather than just saving for the sake of savings, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, there is an end game if you can estimate like what your lifestyle is likely to cost. So I thought that was kind of a cool way. But yeah, I agree. Talking about money probably would be a more worthwhile thing for kids to grow up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a game of role playing, it's how things work. Going back to the childlike curiosity, right? So when did you say, hey, I have to create this book? This book needs to go out. Let's get started on it. What was and what moved you to make it?
Oh my gosh. I first registered this domain 1K 100 ways, like in early 2015, early 2016.
All
like
right.
I have had this idea sitting on the back burner for years and years and years, and like have published, probably 2 or 3, 4 other books like in between then and now. But it's just like one of these ideas that wouldn't go away because it was a cool way to feature a bunch of the listeners, members of the audience who've been supporting the show all along. Like, okay, how can we make you the star of the show for a minute? How can we make you the hero? Showcase all the cool stuff that you guys have going on, and also just to use Amazon as a discovery engine in a lot of ways. Like, so that's kind of the name of the game. It's self-publishing, and really a lot of other podcasting similar, right? Flex your own marketing muscle, like with your own existing audience and network to the extent that you have it, to give the algorithm a little nudge, and then hopefully the flywheel starts spinning and new people discover your content, new people discover the podcast, new people discover the book, and it becomes kind of a self-perpetuating type of thing. At least that's been the goal with self-publishing, rather than there's going to be a huge standalone income stream, because most often it is not the case there.
Yeah, that's it's really important to take note of. Very important to take note of. So do you see any, I don't want to say any gaps in any industries, but do you see any opportunities that are just screaming to you recently on where side hustles should go? I know it's kind of tough to like give advice, because if people do it and it doesn't work, then it's like, oh, I'm the one who pointed that direction.
No. I'll give a couple kind of broad. I mean, gosh, there's 450 episodes of the Side Hustle Show. Like, go pick and choose. A couple models that I'm most interested in. The first one is like, if I was to start a new business today, it would probably be this, and that would be an email newsletter type of service with either a daily or a weekly cadence. And I really like the curation model here, where it's like, you don't necessarily need to come up with your own original thoughts, but if you can become an expert curator in your space, that has huge value for your subscribers, because all of a sudden you're cutting through the clutter, you're becoming part of their daily or weekly routine. Because there's several of these that I subscribe to, The Hustle being one, although they kind of have create their own editorial content. All-Star, I think it's All-Star Money is kind of like personal finance one. But there's a few of these, and they're just part of my daily habit. eBiz Facts is one of my favorite. He does it every week on kind of like the, interesting ways to make money online, kind of stories, kind of headlines. And those are super cool. So I like that. Down the road, now that you have people paying attention to you, you have tons of options. You can monetize with affiliates, with sponsorships, with your own products and services. You got a lot of options going down that road. So if you are already interested in an industry, it's an opportunity to almost work in public and say like, hey, I'm going to be reading this stuff anyways. And there was somebody, he hasn't been on the show, but it was like the TLDR newsletter, kind of like tech news. He was like, I was reading all this, Hacker News, TechCrunch stuff anyways. And so it was like, I just put it in this little newsletter, and he's, doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, I think, in this business now, because it's like so low overhead. It's basically your time, or maybe your assistant's time, in curating the stuff, putting it into an email, hitting send. I'm sure there's tools to make that automated and easier. There's Substack, there's SendFox today. There's, I think Active Campaign is like $9 a month, even if you want to add at the very early stages, like if you want to add some automation down the road later. So that's one that I'm really high on, because I think the inbox is something that probably isn't going away, even though my relationship with email has certainly changed over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And a lot of the like personal communication has shifted towards text, but I'm still in the inbox every day, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat. The other model or the other angle that I kind of like is, and you alluded to it, is video, is YouTube. And
Yeah.
there's a risk here, playing in somebody else's sandbox to a certain extent. But I've seen kind of the power of YouTube as a search engine, and YouTube, I think it kind of straddles the line because it's search engine. It's a huge search engine, and it's also got this wild card viral element where if you can show up in the suggested videos or what plays next kind of a thing,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you can punch way above your weight class, and it's a really interesting place to play. I have seen some surprising success in making dumb little screen capture tutorial videos. How to make a folder in Gmail was one of mine that did really well
Yeah.
for a while. Like how to download high resolution pictures from Instagram was one of mine that did really well for a while before it, before they changed the interface and made it a little trickier. My hack didn't work anymore. How to keep Dropbox from taking up all your local storage on your hard drive. These random little topics do really well. So Kevin Stratvert is a YouTuber with 750,000 subscribers or something at this point, but he is dominating what I'll call tutorial YouTube. And he's like a former Microsoft guy, and he's done, he just does demos, product review, like how to do such and such in this software product. And he's killing it by at least from the outside looking in. So I like that. I like that kind of YouTube as a search engine type of angle, answer people's questions on YouTube rather than, the super highly produced, stuff is flashing in, all these jump cuts and everything style of YouTube production. I think there's a simpler way to go.
Yeah, I've been digging a lot into YouTube as a search engine for a few reasons right now, and it really opened my eyes to, anybody could literally be a millionaire, because the tools that allow there's ways to, I use vidIQ, right? And that tells me, if you use it properly, where everybody is looking. So it's kind of like what we were saying with the side hustles earlier. If you can add your unique spin or an updated version, maybe something came out today and it's how do I do this with the update on this? Yeah. And then you're first in line and it has your spin. Now you're notable. And then it kind of pushes you through. I would really, and going back to the other conversation of skills that I think people should have, presentation, whether it be, verbal or capture on video. It's nice to have good communication skills and good presentation skills. And if you're going to force yourself to make a video, you're going to inevitably be better at them.
Sure.
Yeah. So YouTube's definitely on my list right now. And going back, the one to what you were saying about the curated emails, the one thing that I didn't do business wise, and it was more of a hobby, was movie reviews. I wanted to be my own type of movie critic, because when I love movies. It's my parents had a video store, and there's a whole history with movies. And when I was in LA, I was living in LA for a while. I'd go to the movies 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm I need to start writing about this. And I didn't. And that's something I really wish I did. And I kind of kick myself for it.
How can I get paid to watch movies? Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I was doing it anyway. Yeah. But
if nothing else, now your tickets are a write-off now that you got a YouTube channel about it.
I'll be more than happy to go see more movies.
Yeah.
And actually the Barco where I was going, they had premieres there.
Oh,
so cool. It was kind of, so yeah. So
so you could get in early.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. So that was one thing that I let go. That's the one that got away.
Oh, the one that got away. I think there's always that would be an awesome topic for for an interview podcast. What's the business idea that you wanted to do but you never did? I think that'd be a cool topic for a show. Cool. Now that I'm thinking about it, I wanted to do, because I was in e-commerce and affiliate kind of shopping in the clothing space was my original side hustle. And so when Pinterest came out, that's how long I've been doing this. Pinterest didn't always exist. It was a new thing at one point. It was visual search engine, combined with this affiliate service, combined with personal shopper service. That was going to be my concentric circles there. And it's just the one that got away, it was too heavy for liftoff in a lot of ways. Cause like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so that's kind of what you have to do for a lot of different businesses. It's like, okay, if you were going to validate this quickly, cheaply, and maybe with your own, with the skills that you already have, like, okay, how would you go about and do that? Could you rent something instead of buy it? Could you, practice with your friends and family? Could you, try and start a little bit leaner than, well, I got to go find a developer firm or something to try and build this out for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one. If I had to go back to my younger self, all the business, all the side hustles I did when I was younger, I definitely would have done leaner. I spent money in the wrong places. And
Okay.
that, yeah, it just, I was very much on the,
Do you have an
the
example?
surface. Yeah. Like the surface side, like there was a lot of things where it was like, everything needs to look pretty. And then I was like, oh, operations are suffering. Like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're pretty.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just things like that. And then I quickly realized, like, no, we got to get systems down. We have to be a lean, mean, smooth operation machine. And
Yeah.
then we can look better. Yeah. But yeah, it's, the whole point of doing anything, right, is evolving. We're not going to know all the answers. We're not going to, I hope you don't know all the answers. Then it gets boring. You don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I think there's a nice balance there, though.
It is. I'm still searching for those answers, and that's what I love about my job is I get to learn new stuff every day.
Yeah.
Talk to interesting people, and like I had no idea about your gold business,
Oh yeah,
wine and painting business. Like that's cool.
all types of things. Yeah, I've lived 1,000 business lives, man. My first business ever. I was 15 years old. We never actually did anything with it. It's a longer story than I'm about to tell. But it was called Impulse Clothing Design. I thought at
Okay.
15 years old, I was going to be a clothing designer. I had like 5 stupid ideas and misunderstood someone that I talked to on the phone saying that they can make these clothes for me.
Oh wow,
But like I went through the process. I got an LLC, everything, man. It was,
dude, that's awesome. That's
yeah,
so
it was
cool.
really funny. It was really funny. Yeah, that was
Do
one of
you,
my
do you ever play
firsts.
around like now that you have tabled that? But do you ever play around with like print on demand or merch or anything like that?
Oh, yep. Right here. I'm wearing it right here.
Okay,
Yeah. This is our logo. This is from Printful. They're
nice.
hands down one of my favorites. They're really responsible. Great products. I should probably get an affiliate link from them, huh?
I think
I
they do
use
have
them
an
enough.
affiliate
Yeah.
program. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually used them in a, because I didn't, so when I sold one of my companies, and it was a very low tech company. It was a contracting company. And once I got out of that, I started learning more about ecom. And I knew ecom, but I didn't know it intimately. So one of the first things I did was I actually used Printful to start a jujitsu lifestyle brand. Right? It was
Oh,
called
okay.
Nomad. Yeah, we had hats, shirts, we had all super unique designs that me and my friend Dan Quintana from Blue Rabbit Studios, shout out to him, we came up with together. And it was just an experiment in me understanding ecom.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason I can even float in this world now, is because I understand how ecom and the interconnectivity of different pieces kind of stick together. So, I mean, talk about a side hustle there just for the tuition of education.
Well, it's so cool that you can do this stuff for essentially free, upload a design. Like there's no
Mhm.
inventory, there's no minimum order
Yeah.
quantities, there's none of this stuff. Somebody orders it, then somebody orders it. And like if you
Yeah.
do find something with demand and you eventually want to go down the route of your own store and your own fulfillment, you can, but you don't have to go, you don't have to sink all that cash into it
Yeah.
at the onset.
Yeah. We're in a really, really unique time in history to where things can be realized and evacuated if necessary relatively quickly and cheaply.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep on, guys. Nick, any last thoughts before we go?
I don't know, man. This has been a lot of fun. I always love geeking out
Yeah.
on this stuff. Appreciate the chance to chat.
Yeah, very cool. I will there's some stuff that I want to talk to you about off air when it comes to Washington.
Okay.
Excited that you're headed back there. Once again, thank you so much for being part of this. I appreciate you, man.
All righty. Cheers.
Thank you again for joining us. And if you like what we're doing with the entrepreneurial hierarchy of needs and want to show your support, the best way to show some love is to subscribe and leave us an honest review. We also have a Facebook group where we continue these types of conversations and so much more for all of our continued growth. I can't wait to see you in there.